Hello, and welcome
Hello.
to another episode of
The Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right. I'm Ryan,
And I am Eric.
and we are two real life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry. And have we got a good one for you today, folks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today, I'm so excited for today's show, Ryan, because we're talking to Aaron Wilkerson, which I think, this is his third time on the show?
I think it's number 3, yeah.
Yeah, third time on the show. It's always a good discussion. So, and we're specifically talking about data governance and data governance failures, right? So I'm in charge of a data team, so I don't want a data governance failure. So I'm ready to talk about the topic, and we'll be talking about other stuff too, like we always do. So
yep. And remember, folks, this is a live show, so it's more fun for you, and it's more fun for us if you get your questions and comments and reactions into the chat. We will ask them live to Aaron, and of course, we will always give you a shout out if you let us know where you're watching from. So we've got friend of the show, Paul Mendelson, Cognos Paul, watching from Israel. We've got Tom Wilczek tuning in from Chicago. Welcome, guys. Good to have you back. All right. So let's just add Aaron and kick things off.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, guys.
Welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Good. I'm glad to be back. Is it 3? Yeah, it is 3. I just thought back.
Because when I was making a thumbnail for this one, I reused thumbnail assets, so I already had your profile and your little tag of what you do. So and I'm like, oh, this is the third one. Sweet. I think this is the third one.
Yeah, because I think the first one I was in my last house. The second one I think was at Day-to-Day Texas.
Yep.
That's why I kind of mixed. That was like a live recording at.
Oh,
yeah. We were on. That was the second one.
Yep. Yeah, this is your second time on the live show. So welcome back. We got Richard Ashton tuning in from the UK. Welcome back, Richard. Good to have you here. And Frank Statler from Bavaria. Welcome, Frank.
We got a worldwide show here. You got people all around the world.
We have a strong German contingent.
We do
of viewers.
Yeah, we got a
global audience.
Mm-hmm. So, Aaron, of course, we know you well. Our regular viewers know you well. For anybody who's tuning in for the first time, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yep. So I'm Aaron Wilkerson, Director of Data Strategy and Products at Carhartt. Live in Michigan, right outside the Metro Detroit area, along with Super Data Brothers. We're proud Michiganders. Been in the data field for going on 17 years now, which is crazy to say out loud. Done all types of data work. Started with kind of back-end business objects, reporting administration, got involved with ETL, data warehousing, architecture. I would say the past 10 years have been more so leaning into leadership, just because I realized that as an individual contributor, you're limited in kind of your opportunities and kind of things you can do, but kind of moving into leadership has set off just a whole different kind of a career path in terms of just visibility, working on interesting projects, having influence. So yeah, I've been doing data leadership roles for the past 10 years. Then the governance spot, I think in the past 2 years being at Carhartt, I've had more direct governance responsibilities. In the past, it's kind of, if you don't have direct kind of actual data governance teams, data governance gets kind of splattered across the different, your BI teams, ETL teams, you're kind of sort of responsible for it. But now I kind of have more so direct responsibility as it comes to data governance. So yeah, that's about me. So just been doing data my entire career. So I'm one of the few people kind of this has been, my quote unquote life's work so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. We got Steve. This is Steve Kelpins tuning in from Berlin. Welcome to the show, Steve. Good to have you.
I told you we had a strong German contingent.
I know they show out, man. All right, so so we wanted to. It's always good to have you on the show. I think we want to kick things off by just getting an update on kind of the state of data governance, right? Like what is the state of data governance? What are the hot topics and where are we in the governance journey? It kind of seemed like, if I think about my own career, there was a big focus on governance early in my career, and then it kind of pivoted towards self-service, and governance went, I don't know if I'd say out of fashion, but it kind of got less of a focus. Where are we in that story today?
Got thrown out of the moving vehicle. maybe
Yeah,
put it
yeah.
that way.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we're still struggling. I think data governance. So I think anywhere you go where you have data, it's being governed. So I know Rob Steiner, who wrote a great book about non-invasive data governance, he makes the point where essentially someone's governing it somewhere. It's just how formal is the program around data governance. I would say, like I said, we are struggling in our field just because we have a lot of like book knowledge and like formality and kind of structured around it. So, I created a post I think a couple weeks ago around data governance is failing. Everyone knows it, and I would say more often than not, most people agree with me and like, yeah, we've got some issues in the field. So I think in many cases we have conferences. We've been talking about this stuff for decades. Data. We need to data governance, data quality, master data management, metadata management, like listed. And we've talked about this for a long time, but I think we've just struggled to take root because I think we've kind of taken some approaches that are very strict, formal, like hierarchies, bureaucracy around data governance and kind of like trying to force people into it. And I think, people are pushing back and they're saying like, we don't want this. That's an IT problem. That's a data team problem. I aren't you guys already doing this? Why don't we have governed data? So I would say it's an ongoing problem that I think we continue to struggle with it. And I think the good one, it's one of the things where it's still around though. Like I think there's still a need to figure out data governance. And I think with the emergence of AI, I think you're seeing it's coming back around where people realize that in order to build these models and kind of do this stuff with AI or data science or choose your acronym or name, they realize that it's based upon data. So if you have very weak data governance programs, you're kind of weak data practices, then you're just going to have weak models and kind of weak AI. So we're lucky in that it just keeps hanging around. It won't go away. So that's one thing. We're just we've struggled, and I think we can continue to struggle with it. If I'm honest.
Yeah, is there an expectation at some companies? If you say, oh yeah, we got to take governance more seriously. Do you think some places the reaction would be like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Aren't we already? Like, is there like an assumption in some places that this is maybe on the side of business that, oh, someone's already taking care of this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's assumed that, and I think it depends on where the data team sits in an organization. And throughout my career, I've always been a part of data teams. So I've always sat in data teams, and those data teams have always sat within like within IT organization. So I think it's assumed that we have a data governance problem. So let's go talk to the IT team or the data team to fix it, or they need to drive better data governance, data practices. So I think, and that's where I think we find the challenge is that we go and say like, hey, we can't, like, we need your help. Like, the bad data got there somehow, like someone put it there either through a business process that's gone rogue or a business application that was configured incorrectly. So yeah, I would say to answer your question, yeah, I think it's they assume that it's already being handled by someone else. So they figure out who's the head of data or the data leader and say, okay, hey, let's talk to this person and figure out like, why is it bad and what are they going to do to fix it for us?
Here we got a question from Frank, who asks, do you think the EU AI Act, which requires data governance for high-risk use cases, will help with U.S. companies taking governance for data AI more seriously?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, to be honest, I'm not up to date fully on the EU AI Act. But I would say overall, I mean, when it comes to, I guess, compliance, regulatory, I think that's where you find a lot of, like, I mean, when I say data governance has failed, I think you see people push back a little bit and say, well, in the places where it's required, so highly, like in terms of healthcare or heavily regulated areas where there's kind of government mandates or compliance things, I do think that you see data governance kind of practices there. But I mean, I still think even those situations, they still struggle. I just think that you may see more formality to it, where you may see formal heads of data governance who kind of have the policy arm of it. So I think that regulatory compliance things will help make the case that you need to take it more seriously. But but think about it. I mean, you see companies all the time that get fined, right? I can't remember the company, but there's some of the companies that get fined hundreds of millions of dollars because of data protection issues or data privacy issues. And even those cases, like, they're not taking it seriously. And some of them, I think, take the calculated risk of, yeah, they could go and spend a lot of money to have better practices, but taking the risk where we're rather risk getting fined than doing all the work it takes to kind of figure out these processes and management and putting team members around. It's like they may just take the risk of getting fined. But yeah, so I would say, yeah, potentially maybe taking it more seriously, but still a little bit not as good as probably would need it to be.
Yeah, we have this comment from Kunal. He says, data governance is business drive and IT supports. Do you agree with that?
In theory, but it's hard. it's very hard in practice. I mean, I would say the place I've seen it work is where data governance is embedded within the business, and weak data governance has implications for like the bottom line. So, for example, in products and like in services business, very tough. But I would say if you're working in a product space where you're selling things online, you have a digital nature to your, like, for example, you see Walmart, right? Walmart is throwing a lot of money into AI to improve like all their their product data, the descriptions, how to find things. So in that case, data, that kind of product data, master data is part of the business. So I think when you see those situations, you do have like business owners, because they realize that if you don't have good product data, if you don't have good data about what you're selling, then you're not going to sell much of anything. So I think you will have a lot more business support. So I'll say in certain cases, you do see kind of a business drive for it, because they realize without it, you don't have as much, you don't sell as much, you can't find customers, you can't reach out to them. But if you don't have those use cases where it's very clear about the value of it, then I think the business delegates it down to IT, and it becomes like an IT problem that we have to pull the business along and drag them and say, please, come to my meetings.
Gotcha. So when we say we're talking about data governance, are we just talking about like so I'm in charge of reporting, so my brain always goes straight to reporting.
Yeah.
Are we talking about just like access? Because when I hear data governance, what I think is, roles give access to tables, right? Because that's what it is in my world right now. Like, when we're talking data governance, are we talking about something like more elevated than that, like metadata access or like company culture around data? Like when we say data governance, like what umbrella are we talking about here?
Yes, all that. I mean,
Right.
and I think that's part of the problem. I think it's such a broad and ubiquitous term where it can cover so much. But I would agree with you, Eric, that in my background, I come from a very analytics, BI, data warehousing heavy area where our data governance was more analytics, reporting. And yeah, it's like, okay, who has access to view financial data? If this field is blank, who's responsible for making sure this field's not blank for this report? So yeah, I definitely come from that background. Yeah, absolutely. That's a use case for data governance as well. But you can also flip it on, like I said, of how your product data, like that's governed around. So essentially, whatever data you have in the organization, you have an opportunity for some type of governance there. So it really depends upon the use cases and the value of governing that. Because in some cases, it's very tightly coupled with applications. So if you have integrations, like that's kind of controlled by the applications talking to each other. So I think that's the challenge too, is that you have maybe one person who's in charge of governance, but you have like the entire organization. So, okay, how does like a team of like 2 people run data governance for like a huge organization where there's data everywhere? It's like, okay, then you have to focus on, okay, what's the biggest high value use cases? And that's the focus, because if you start working about like why reports are showing blanks for a customer phone number that no one cares about, then you can focus on that, but it's tough, right? So I think that's the problem is, okay, what do you mean when you say data governance for your organization? It has to be kind of organization specific.
Gotcha. Like it's funny. You can tell that you come from an analytics background because your example of the blank phone numbers on reports. It's just like I'm having flashbacks.
Oh my god! I mean, I've got some bad heartburn over just like, and that's in the services business where in the corporate lens we show all this data, and the corporate, like, why do we have all these blank phone numbers? Like, well, it's because no one put them in there or no one like updated them. Why don't they? Because they don't need them. Either it's not part, like they don't need to call people. They have no use of a phone number, or they have a different system that has it. So it's always, I usually find phone numbers, addresses, email addresses are those top things that people complain about. It's like, well, we need data governance over this. Yeah, but I mean, who's going to maintain this? How are you going to get this information? Who's going to keep track of it? But it's those common things that always come up when it comes to like customer data or location data, where it's like, how do we keep this up to date? And it's like, I mean, I don't know. You got to make sure people put the right information in at the start of it.
Mm-hmm.
We have another comment here from Kunal. Thanks for all the good comments, by the way. Keep them coming. He says, operational plain data governance versus analytical plain data governance. Whether you come from the left or the right, you need to eventually meet in the middle to govern the entire data lifecycle from generation to insight. And I think that's smart. One thing kind of related to Kunal's question I wanted to bring up was this idea of data contracts. Do you see that having much impact on governance so far? And if so, how do you see them fitting into to the overall governance picture?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a little bit about it. I know that there's a couple folks who are big on LinkedIn talking about data contracts. I know it's not necessarily, I won't say it's not necessarily a new concept, but I would say it's newish, where outside of like the two people talking about it, I just don't hear a lot about data contracts.
Chad Sanderson.
Yeah, Chad Sanderson.
I feel like it's a LinkedIn thing that like I haven't really seen. Right.
Correct. I'm in the same boat. Like I know that they're great evangelists and they talk about it, but in my
sounds like a good idea, but I just haven't, implemented it myself. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen like examples of like, of the contracts where you have like the schema, you have the quality rules, you have a lot of that. But I would say from my perspective it seems like it's more, I won't say necessarily a tool, but like it's more kind of data management thing. Like we struggle already just trying to get the kind of basis locked down. So I think the concept of data contracts is kind of like, okay, we would need to kind of get some of the basics down before we consider that, because we're struggling kind of just to keep up with, either reporting or the other data governance initiatives. Someone just said I've yet to see them truly implemented anywhere. I agree. Like I've heard about them on LinkedIn, but it seems like one of those LinkedIn things where I've not seen it in the real world.
It seems like whenever you look at these definitions, I suspect maybe it's one of those things that has got some degree of some degree of implementation, maybe at tech firms or software firms, because they always talk about it like, oh, it's the handoff between the application teams and software engineering and the data teams, right? And I think in a lot of businesses, that's just not how it works, right? Especially if you work in a business where you make things, right? You have products, and your product is like this shirt. Shout out to Carhartt. I love that.
There you go. Love it.
Like it's a shirt, right? The product is not an app to try to get people to go on dates. The product is not, a way to, is not a thing to help you organize meetings. It's like a shirt, This interface between the software devs and the data team it's not really about that, is it? It's like you have the enterprise applications, you have the operational applications, and the data team. And in that case, there's less premium because, your ERP system is not changing every 3 days because the engineers delivered a new feature, right? It's a different world.
Yeah, and I would say most companies I've been at, to your point, we don't have a large amount of software devs. Like typically what I've seen is you have enterprise applications, right? You have either SAP, you have some type of ERP system, and you're pulling data from that ERP system down to your data lake, data warehouse, database, spreadsheet, whatever you want to call it. And you're also pulling from other kind of enterprise systems. But to your point, we don't really have like software dev. We kind of merged to where the software devs are they're BI, like business analysts or IT analysts, system analysts. They're more they're configuring the things.
Specific application users, right? Experts instead of people who write C.
And a lot of times those schemas don't change often, right? It's like they give you base tables, you pull those base tables, but those, to your point, Ryan, those aren't changing very often. They're not writing brand new table or changing. Like it's pretty locked down schema and structures. Maybe once every couple of years when you do an upgrade, it may change. But I mean, usually it's the data inside, it's the data itself that you're worried about, not the actual like tables and columns changing, because we're using these bigger applications. Or even nowadays, there's also APIs that a lot of people are using too. But yeah, you don't really have software devs as much because we're using these bigger brand names, at least in my world.
Yeah, that's the place I've worked too, right? I mean,
Same here.
in the Detroit area, we make stuff, right? And companies that make stuff, they don't have an army of software engineers who are changing schemas or API definitions every Tuesday. It's just a different focus. We have a question here from Greg Jungles. Good to hear from you, Greg. Greg and I used to work together at PM Square, and Eric used to work there too, actually.
Yeah.
So Greg's question is, and this is obviously the question in a lot of ways, but how do you manage governance in a self-service analytics world where people can and do, I would add, pull in Excel CSV files at their will?
Oh, easy. You just get rid of Excel, right? That's the
Oh, yeah.
That's even
Piece of cake.
Next
Job done.
Job done. Mine equals blown. I mean, I would say that's the $1 million question that we've been dealing with since the advent of BI tools. Well, the advent of BI tools on day one and day second was when they said, okay, then let you export to Excel. So I think that's a challenging thing where you can't really govern. I mean, my opinion, you can't really govern that. I think you have to kind of stay close to understand those different business users, those different use cases of why they're exporting to Excel. But I think you can't really, once someone exports that to Excel, you can't really control that. I think that you have to know all the different stakeholders to say, hey, this number came from someone who exported this to Excel. And once it goes to Excel, we can't really control that. So you kind of have to lean on those different leaders to ask them, okay, hey, this metric, we know we have this metric over here. You don't have to export this, or it's an opportunity to say, okay, we can pull this metric for you. You don't have to export it. Let's help you out. But I think once you kind of allow that to happen, or usually that does happen, there's really not much you can do. But I think that's where the people and the relational part around, okay, you need to understand who are those groups. Do you know the leader there? Did they understand that, okay, if you're gonna show this number off to people, can you make sure they know that you guys created this? Or I have to tell people, okay, we didn't create that came from someone else. So I think understanding those relationships and it's a hands-on game trying to understand those relationships and kind of navigating that. But it's really a challenging thing where you can't, I would say, you can't stop it. You can try to stop it, but you're going to spend a lot of years trying to fight that battle, and you're most likely going to lose. So it's kind of is it worth your time? And what's the worst case scenario? Okay, if they export it to Excel, okay, what's going to happen? Is it? I get that it's not quote unquote best practice, but what's the harm? How's it going to hurt the organization if they export something and they create some calculation? If it's the wrong calculation, that's a discussion. But I think you have to be careful about being too much of a purist sometimes with these things and saying, hey, I only got so much time in a day. I can only fight certain battles.
Yes, I gave up. I think it was sometime in 2016. I remember I was I spent my career up to that point in BI, going to people and saying, why do you export this to Excel? And then trying to identify that data people, if we can identify what they're doing with the export, right? And then do that in the BI tool or the analytics platform or the data warehouse, then they'll stop exporting. And that's not true. You'll just shift everything 1 degree further, where then there's just, they're going to new reason they have to export to Excel. So I gave that fight up.
Yeah. And I think my spicy take is let them. I don't care at that point. And I think it's kind of my rants about self-service that I won't go down a full rant, but it's one of the things where you let them do that because you have a bigger problem to focus on. So if you solve the problem where people trust your numbers enough to use your data products, your Power BI dashboard, your Tableau reports, they can use it. That's great. Let them do what they want with it. You can go focus on a much bigger problem the organization probably has. So don't waste your time trying to focus. I mean, it's kind of I could talk about the plumber, where it's not our job to teach people how to get to unclog your sink. Your job is to go fix the bigger like leaks in the house, or like in putting a new bathtub in, something like that. Like focus on the bigger stuff versus trying to do the simple stuff like that. And we need to give up that fight when it comes to like Excel and trying to control that. Like focus on a bigger problem, because you probably got one that you're probably ignoring, don't have time for.
Yeah. I mean, and I can tell you, like, as you know, as I've moved through my career from a practitioner to now someone who's in charge of a BI product. I mean, you can probably tell I'm not in the studio today. I'm down in Virginia meeting with one of our biggest clients, and we're actually turbocharging Excel export for them. Where, you know, like we're giving them API where they can automate Excel distribution out of the BI platform, you know, and they're even thinking about like, can we use some of Good Data's AI tools to predict when people need Excels and just send it to them, right?
Right.
So they're embracing it 100%.
That's the question. If you think there's some malice use of metrics, then I think that's the conversation around, hey, we think that people are calculating. Then I think that's how you can engage and say, okay, hey, we've seen this. Like, hey, this is not the industry. This is not how the corporation thinks about this metric. Like, this is how you should calculate it instead. And they say, thank you, then move on with it. But at the end of the day, if like we're all working for the exact same company. So if someone's getting value out of the stuff you're producing, it's going to help the company move forward. Then the way in which they got there, like, do you really, like the CEO on the earnings call will never talk about like, well, you know, we've kind of moved all of our data to, you know, dashboards and versus Excel. And no one cares. They just care about, you know, the outcomes, the business objectives, and the strategic initiatives. Like that's what they care about and moving that forward. But this whole thing, yeah, I think that's something that we need to give up and focus on actual like work that's going to drive business outcomes.
Yeah.
And overall, my last point is kind of governance as well. I think that's where governance needs to go towards, is really trying to focus on the governance of things that's going to help business outcomes and driving the business forward.
Yeah, we have, you know, just a comment, you know, from Frank Classic. You build a shiny dashboard. Can I export that into an Excel table? Yeah, I mean, it's like virtually every dashboard I've ever built. I think at some point showing it to the user, it was like, so where's the Excel button?
That's why the table or the list, depending on the tool, is the best visualization, because it serves the best purpose for what people want it for. So
yeah. And then Kunal says to Frank, Excel is the leading analytics platform. I mean, that's true. That's true. Yeah. It really is, and we need to find a way to embrace it. Now, who is it that said this? This is Steve Kalpin says, what if you could enforce governance rules in Excel? And I think there have been some attempts over the years, like people have.
Didn't Cognos have something like that?
Yes, people have created plugins. So like Cognos had one. I know. I'm sure
Cognos Analytics for Excel or something, Cafe or something like that.
Or like you could be in Excel, and from Excel you could look at the metadata layer of the BI tool, and pull fields into Excel. And then they also put a refresh button in there, where like you could pop open Excel and just hit the refresh button, and it would issue a SQL query to the BI tool and return data. So that was cool.
I feel like it didn't really take off though.
Not really.
Yeah. Because I think people were probably like, I can just dump it. I don't need to know all these things. Like, can I just dump the data itself versus trying? Exactly. I think it's the skill sets are they jump pretty high. So either you have people who know how to create reports, but then I think we try to create these products of this middle person where they know how to do reports. And you want to do these Excel add-ins and plugins and connect them to Excel and table. Yeah, but if they know that, could they just write SQL queries and export that to Excel? Like, did they really need to do all this middle stuff where you're trying to do all these things with Excel and Python and all that, or they can just write it better in the application itself? We think these people exist, but I've usually met either they like writing the stuff in the reports, or they like just doing the hands-on like query writing and kind of crunching that stuff in the data tables.
We do have a comment here from Michael Dunphy. Discovered you guys yesterday. Great videos and streams. Thanks for what you guys do. Well, thanks for joining us. To have you. Tell your friends, by the way.
Every Thursday on YouTube and on LinkedIn. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Just search for Ryan Dolly or Eric Dolly, and we'll be there.
We will be there. So I have another question from Kunal here. Thoughts on where unstructured data management fits within a data government framework?
Oh, that's a good one. mean, I would say unstructured data. I think that's everyone has talked about. That's a huge untapped potential for data teams where we're very good. We've kind of figured out the whole structured data world of it. But I think when it comes to unstructured data, that's where I think you hear about use case around like, how do you leverage AI? How do you use things like Copilot? So in terms of unstructured, I think the question becomes like the generation of it. So are you talking about like Word? Are you talking about text files? Or sorry, are you talking about like Word documents? Are you talking about video or audio transcripts? Like, so I think it really depends on what type of unstructured data are you trying to use. And I think there is a quality of, okay, is that fit for purpose? Where did it originate from? So I think you can definitely put together some frameworks around unstructured data. I mean, I think it could be kind of a little bit of a wild, wild west depending upon where, like I said, where it's coming from, where where it's being generated, and also how you plan to use it. Because I think we very much still live in like a structured table world, like relational databases, dimensional modeling, like that type of stuff. So I think a lot of cases I've seen it, and I think Kimball did this before he retired, where you had all these unstructured things, but eventually it got put into kind of structured models because that's the world in which that's the world in which we know. So I think that's kind of where we do have some opportunities in the future for kind of unstructured data management. I would say most of us are struggling just with structured data. So I think it's kind of still one of those, how will we use this? So if I had this huge amount of text files and audio files, how could I use that in some way in which to benefit the business? I think that's where we struggle with, is trying to link that use case to that data. And I know we always talk about the rich data and tons of potential there, but it's okay, how can we use this to benefit the business that people actually would use?
Do you think AI is going to have an impact on that? Like I see this idea, AI will be built on unstructured data, or like, it can understand it, right? Like we're not going to have to structure the text files or the video because AI can interpret what the text files mean. So, I mean, do you see AI fitting into that story?
I mean, I would lean to my good friend Juan Cicada when it comes to like knowledge grabs and semantic layers. I think that's where you still need that semantic layer, because you have to translate all that text and videos to things that make sense to the business, or else you're gonna have this huge stream of just like consciousness that's kind of provided, but you need to understand, what does that mean for the business? Like, how does that translate to our business process? What if this is important versus people just kind of saying things? Is this our common vernacular? So I think that you can use, and I mean, I'm curious about this too, just around leveraging AI to kind of take a lot of the information and kind of that text, video, audio, any of that, and kind of translating it to kind of help to create some type of a knowledge grab or semantic layer for the business. But I still think you still going to need like people in the mix that can kind of figure out what's good and what's bad. Because you can use AI. AI doesn't know, so it's going to generate something. But a human is going to need to take that and say, okay, this is garbage, this is crap, we need to try this again, or take out certain things. Oh yeah, this was a meeting that threw it off and it misunderstood. So I think you still need that human in the loop, and that's the question: is, okay, who's going to do that? So in your org structure, are you hiring like a knowledge engineer, a semantic engineer, or elevating a business analyst role to understand that? I think that's the trick, is that someone has to still be responsible for taking the app. I would say, definitely there's opportunity there. It kind of goes to the question for Kamal about unstructured data governance is, we have tools that can do that, but someone has to now take that and make use of it. And I think that's where we have to figure out who that is. Do they have the skills, the new skills? Are they ready to do that? How does the business involve with that too? So I think that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's as we often say on this show, there's so much potential for AI. I don't think anybody knows today exactly how it's going to play out. Anybody who says they do know is trying to sell you something.
Yeah, but I think it makes all the unstructured data. I think what the AI will end up doing is, even if it's for its own understanding, if it gets smart enough to change things for its own understanding, it's going to turn it into structured data. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's easier for humans to understand structured data. It's easier for anything else that thinks to understand structured data as well.
Yeah.
Your dog can find its toy if it always leaves it in the same place, right? So it's like
Exactly.
these concepts that
Yeah.
make it easy for humans to think, and he makes it easier for humans to process stuff. I imagine it's going to apply to AI. So I think like AI is going to just end up structuring the data for us and for itself.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's where it kind of takes it. And I think where you see a lot of graph, and you even look at Microsoft, they've been working on this for years where they have access to Word documents, Outlook, calendars, all your emails, all this stuff. And they're essentially kind of creating like a Microsoft graph to try to connect all these concepts so that you go on Copilot, you can say, okay, who is Aaron Wilkerson? So Aaron Wilkerson is the director. Who does he report to? Where he reports to the head of data. So I think that's where the AI is kind of like that interface, but you still kind of need on top of the or under the interface, like that kind of connection and that structured way of kind of connecting all these different concepts together. It may not be a relational database table, but it may be a graph, but that graph it still is a structured representation of between nodes and connection. Like you still have to kind of organize it to make it make sense to humans. Or else we're like, yeah, this is too much. I think also you on top of all this opportunities, you still have a business user who you have to give this to and say, okay, can you use this to improve a business process to get an outcome? Because you're probably not a lot of the stuff you're not selling this to a customer. You're trying to make sense of the world to tell a business user, like, here's how we can improve our process. And business users, like, we're all nerded out on this stuff, but kind of your average business user is just kind of they're doing their day-to-day work and they're trying to kind of get through things. They're trying to help fulfill orders or sell products to customers. And they're like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. So we're even just trying to learn ourselves to train and help bring up our kind of business stakeholders. So as much as we say the capabilities are, we're still limited by the ability of the business and those stakeholders to take this and do something with it. And that's, I think, kind of blocks some of the advancements is like, yeah, this is very tough. And then the change management is very tough to get them to sign off on this stuff.
How do you approach that just in general? I mean, you have an end user community, say you're trying to put some new governance process in place. And what advice do you have for people to best work with those end users, especially in situations where change management is hard?
I mean, I would say patience is the big one. Definitely patience, because you have to kind of walk people along the journey. And I think that's where we kind of get in, and we talk about data governance failure. I think that's what it is too, where we think, hey, it's obvious. This is obvious. Like, okay, this is not right. We have to realize that, the folks that you're trying to persuade, they have a day job. So you're asking them to do and they're incentivized probably to make sure that we're, issuing POs or make sure we're getting in our products from our vendors or we're servicing customers. So they have a normal day job and you're coming at them with something that has nothing to do probably with their day job. You're trying to get them to do or change something different. You kind of have, it's the whip from like, what's in it for me? So you kind of have to kind of do it's kind of empathy. So it's okay, why should they care about it? How does it impact them? Why wouldn't they do this? So it's a lot of work, kind of pre-work to figure out, okay, how do I persuade this person to think differently, try something new, and how much effort is going to be. Some people get it. Like some people you can talk to, like, get it, Aaron, I know what you're asking, I know what to do. But something you have to explain it and say, okay, this is why this is important. This is why you should care about it. This is what I'm asking you to do, and can you consider it? And they may come back and say, yeah, let's talk next week. So it could take many, many meetings, many, many months. But I'll say patience is number one. And I think it's just kind of the empathic learning around, okay, where's this person at on the journey? And how do I get them from step 1 to step 5? Because that may take me many months to kind of get them there. But I think it's not easy. It's not a very simple thing to say, okay, we want you to try this out. Like even with governance, hey, we want you to kind of implement this new data governance practice or data governance policy. Good luck with it. They'll say yes up front. You go back, yeah, I didn't have time for that. I forgot. I don't really care. My boss told me to do something else. So yeah, I think a lot of stuff is just a journey. And if you don't have the patience, that's where kind of these things fall apart, where the leaders say, I didn't have patience, I'm doing other stuff, so I can't bring this group along because I don't have time, or they quit and they go to a different place. Yeah, I like patience. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
This is coming from Paul. He says, I suspect AI will be used to automatically build metadata models based on questions. Users will ask, the AI will figure out what fields are needed. Data contracts will help if they provide AI hints. So an interesting thing about this, Paul, we have a metadata semantic layer in good data, and you can add in comments and descriptions and whatever, all sorts of metadata that you could put in. All of that would be very helpful to an AI. but people generally don't do it, right? They haven't been building these data models in BI tools. There's that field for the description and the owner and all that other stuff, and they just haven't been filling any of that stuff out in 99 the situation. So now you've got this AI that really needs that information. It needs to know who owns who created this field, when did they create it, what does it mean in business terms, and none of that stuff is there, right? And one of the ways that we solve that is we actually built we wrote a little Python script that will look at your metadata model, analyze it. It will take all the information and along with an LLM, it will guess, right? And it will fill in the metadata descriptions for you. And then you can go through and say, okay, these are right or these are wrong, right? So it's like we're using an AI to populate the metadata so that the AI can understand the data model. And it saves a lot of time, but of course it's often wrong. And so, I guess my point of my response is, Paul, is I think it'll be turtles all the way down, right? As AIs working with AIs, with humans in the loop, saying, yeah, this is right. No, this is not right.
Yeah, and I think that the trick with some of these use cases is, and it's kind of how we got caught up in the data catalog issues we have too, is, well, I guess 2 points. One is I think we depend on humans a lot. So I think if you're depending on humans to fill out stuff accurately, like, you're in trouble. Because humans are terrible about filling out things that they're not required to, they're not compensated to do that. Like, humans are terrible about filling out, or you may see just a whole different, like, we've seen that with like abbreviations of states and cities. Like, humans are terrible about filling out things regularly, and doing that with high level accuracy. Usually it's blank or it's just like garbage that they're putting in there. The other point is, like, I think when it comes to, and it kind of, I think it's similar to like the whole natural language process we put in BI tools and the whole text to SQL. I kind of have like a kind of hot take on. I'm just not sure how many business users actually like have these. I think usually you see people have the exact same questions. They kind of have the exact same process they do every day, week, month, and year like that. So I think up front people may ask questions of these things, but I think after a while the questions stop and they cease. So I'm curious around with these use cases, how often the frequency in which we will see the end users asking questions of AI models that requires some of these metadata models and even graphs and like that. I think it starts high, then all of a sudden it falls off. They're like, all right, I got what I need. I don't really care anymore. And that's the whole thing. Data catalog. Well, what people ask questions about what data we have? Yeah, for a week, but they're like, I don't care. None of this can help me, or it's not what I really want. So I think that's my challenge with that is just, are we putting tons of money and resources into like these different tools, but the business community doesn't care at all?
Yeah. Maybe it helps them get their Excel sheet earlier, right? It's the same problem of classic BI. It's just it's like, oh, I got my Excel sheet.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fun toy. I think you're right to some extent. Like, people will, I can ask these questions now, and then they realize, like, actually, I don't have that many questions.
Or like, at least right now, most of them, it's actually isn't very good at answering questions.
Yeah.
Right? Well, his name that like the Microsoft Copilot, the Copilot that's in Power BI, is because they call everything Copilot. I asked it a question and it told me, I can't answer questions about the underlying data, only specific visualizations. I'm like, well, then why am I talking to you?
Exactly.
I can look at the visualization. I don't need you to tell me about it.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to face. I think we all nerd out on it. We think it's great. We think it's amazing, but we have to kind of give it that level of like realism. Like us as parents, right? Our kids will come up with the craziest ideas, want to do all this stuff, but really, like, I can't afford that, or no, that's not a good idea for these different reasons. Like, unfortunately, we have to kind of hit the realism filter or veil of, like, no one really cares about this, or it's not that important. Or for example, typically in your organization, you have like a sales meeting where every week they pull up and run the exact same sales reports of what we made last week, last month, last quarter, compared to budget, compared to forecast. Like, they run the exact same reports over and over again. They may ask a couple questions, but usually if you sit down with them, like, sometimes you don't need AI. Like, if you sit down with them on session, you probably get all the questions they'll ask over the course of a fiscal year. They're asked, okay, why is this off base? What did we not sell that we thought we were going to? Or like, what customers can we try to upsell to? Like, they'll probably be the same 5 questions. So like, do you really need AI in some of these use cases? Or is like, do you just need to sit down with someone for an hour and grab all those questions and boom, you have it. Like, do you need that bigger? Is the problem space that large?
Yeah, that's that's very true. I've been in those sales meetings, where it's the same stuff, right? So if you can just get those same, they're not really ad hoc questions, they're repeat questions.
Yeah.
Paul has a string of things here. So he's talking about the proper use of AI is doing the slog work, and I agree. Where it can help with that, it's enormously helpful.
Mm-hmm.
He says we're all old data guys, so the idea of asking a question to get data is alien to us, but younger, newer people expect to just be able to ask. And then he says, okay, maybe Eric isn't that old. He's Gen. So actually, this is an all millennial podcast right now.
Yeah. I'm solidly. I'm on the younger side of millennial, but not that far. I have some friends who are closer to Gen Z. So
no, and I'm the oldest possible millennial. I was born in 80, so like I'm as old as it gets.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm 90. I think it goes to like 94, 95 or something, right?
Something
or
like
whatever what news writer decided the range was going to be.
But also, I do agree with Eric Paul's point and I think that's the conversation we have is with the newer generation, they're AI native, so to speak, where they are using these tools and there will be an expectation to have some of these interfaces and kind of asking some of these questions. So for example, I was at a hackathon. We sponsored a hackathon in Dearborn, and they had like 100 or so project teams of like 3 or 4 people, and I was kind of a judge. But I would say the vast majority of them had an interface into like Gemini, Claude, OpenAI. So the vast majority of these people know like how to leverage these tools and these APIs and interfaces. So yeah, I think that is the question of like, how can we leverage some of these tools to kind of make it a lot easier? I mean, even with governance, I think maybe not in 2025 or 2026, but is there a future where, AI can kind of help take over the terrible parts of governance that we all hate? And it can kind of do that, some of that dirty work to say, yeah, like you're missing these values, you need to kind of fill these in or you're fired or you're not gonna get your bonus. Like, how do you leverage these tools to kind of improve our lives? And I think I would say we're not there yet, but I would say that is a point where the younger generation is coming in where they expect like some type of AI interface or like an assistant. You hear about agents, so AI agents. I think that is something that I would say is coming in the next couple of years potentially.
Michael asks, any advice for someone who is early in their career in the data space? So Michael, you mentioned you just discovered us yesterday. I asked this question as the last question to every guest. So if you go back through our archives, which are all on YouTube where you're watching, and you can find in the stream archive, I've asked this question to, I don't know, at this point we've had maybe 60 guests, individual guests on the show, something like that. So there is a rich history of answers to this question. But since you're here and you've asked it live, I will ask it now of Aaron. So Aaron, any advice for someone who's early in their career in the data space?
Yeah, I would say number one would be learn your business. Learn, if you're at a company, understand why the company exists, what value they provide in the marketplace, and how do they make money. So if you think about, I'm a huge fan of Chipotle, for example. Like, Chipotle makes great food. They exist to kind of service the customers looking for that. And they make money through, you show up to their place, they make a bowl or tacos, you hand them your debit card, you hand them money, and that's how they pull in money. So I think understanding the business and how they make money, why they exist, and how they service their customers, that should frame all the work that you do. And I think that'll help you, because I've definitely been burned a couple of times, like chasing after like these shiny toys, these fun projects, and realize that they don't help the business at all, like do much of anything, or have no future at all. So I would say really try to remember that we're here in service of the business, which is in service of its customers. So if there's no linkage to what you're doing to those business outcomes, or like how do they sell more product or bring in more customers or upsell existing customers, like that's where we have to follow. I think in the data space, we've failed at that many times, myself included, many times. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is that in many cases it has nothing to do with data. It has to do with the business, and data is there to kind of support, but it's not like the feature player. It's not the prime time player. It's kind of a supporting player that helps them out. We definitely need to kind of attribute and say, hey, this is our part of the world, but we're not the primary player unless our business is selling data products. But in many cases, it's not. So I would say that's my quick answer.
Yeah, it's almost like you hear people say sometimes, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? And it's like, it's kind of apply that to data and business, right? You like fall in love with solving business problems.
Yep.
Not, the data components of it, which I agree with 100%. Like, and you can, at least you could, I think you still can have a really good career just being an expert in, one particular technology, Michael. Like I was, for the longest time, I was the Cognos guy. We've got a guy who's known as Cognos Paul in the chat here. But the important thing is, even in that situation where you're like a world expert in whatever, Tableau or, writing Python for data science, whatever it is, the thing that actually delivers value is your ability to solve those business problems with whatever technical tool you're expert in.
Yeah.
The technology changes, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say that, like, to be like, if someone can rely on you, that like, they really know their technical stuff, but I can also just rely on them to actually get stuff done and like understand things and like independently research stuff, and like, because like becoming a manager, that's one of the main things. Like I love it when I go with like someone who's on my team, and I go to them and I'm just like, can you take care of this? And I know that they can, right? They have the technical skill, and I know if something comes up, they'll be able to handle it and make suggestions to me of what the best course of action is. So if you can like you were saying, like understand the business, like that will set you apart so far.
Yeah, because technology is changing. When I first started, I was the business objects guy. I knew everything about it, but then these tools go away. Someone acquires them. They stop investing in them. So you're going to go through many different tools and technology, but those business problems are always there. They will always be around. How do I like reduce costs to improve profitability? Sell new stuff to new customers, sell stuff to existing customers, upsell them, have them buy more. Like those will always be those same use cases, but the technology to support that is going to change rapidly. Especially nowadays, it's going to change rapidly, and there's always new players in the space.
Yeah, Paul has a comment here that I think is spot on too. So you only get known as an expert if you stick your neck out and publish. As an introvert, it's super difficult, but he's beginning to learn to enjoy giving sessions. And Paul's a friend of mine, so I know and I've seen Paul's journey as far as this goes. And this is, I think, Michael, also a hugely underrated thing. It is hard sometimes for data people to do, but for all three of us on this show right now, I think putting yourself out there, once you have some expertise, being willing to go out and say, hey, I have something to add to the conversation. It can be completely transformative for your career. And so, in Paul's case, Paul had, like in the blog era, Paul had a blog that became the Cognos blog in the world. And that led to Paul's career as one of the world's leading Cognos experts. Eric and I do this show. Aaron, you're on LinkedIn all the time. You speak at conferences. So there's this element of where I think learning those skills, how to organize your ideas, present your ideas, building yourself out there will have a huge impact on your career too.
Yeah. When in doubt, just make a YouTube tutorial on something.
Yeah. Well, it's a good way to learn too. It's
a great way to learn because because I have like 1 or 2 Power BI videos that like have like 50,000 views or something, which is crazy, right? But like that's because I was working on a Power BI dashboard. I'm like, how do I do this? I looked online. No one had a good answer how to do this. I figured out how to do it. I made a 10-minute video. It's like, I've got a 10, like, now I've got like myself out there is like making videos as an expert on a topic, right? So when in doubt, just do stuff, kind of,
Yeah, building a network is huge. I mean, Joe Reese commented about that recently. When people ask about career advice, he asked about their network. I mean, I think nowadays where it's tougher to find jobs, people getting laid off left and right, I think having those connections and kind of making yourself known. I mean, the only reason why I'm on the show is because I started posting on LinkedIn, and then
Yeah.
Ryan, you and I connected a couple times and met each other virtually. I've spoken at conferences, been on podcasts, but all that was through like me deciding to post silly stuff on LinkedIn. So I think growing your network is definitely like in the top 3 things of what I would suggest with your career, like making yourself known, reaching out to people. You'd be surprised how many things you think are dumb are actually not dumb. People find them valuable. But yeah, definitely networking for the win. I wish I would have done that earlier in my career. I didn't get started until like the past 2 years. So I'll say the first 15 years I was quiet. I did nothing. But in the past 2 years, I definitely invested in my network. But I wish I would have started way a long time ago if I can go back.
Yep. And now we're hosting a Detroit data meetup. That's everything culminated into the Detroit low-key data meetup.
December 17th. This next one.
Let's see if I can. I'll try to get a flyer before we run out of time.
Yeah, Eric has a draft flyer ready for our review.
Love it.
For real though, join us December 17th at the Detroit Low-Key Data Meetup.
Unless he's in Germany. If he's in Germany, then I suggest you make the flight to Metro Detroit. You can join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes tell people though, if you are going to come visit us in Detroit, you should come in like June, July. That's the time. All right. So we're at the top of the hour here. I want to thank you for coming on to the show again, Aaron. It's always good to have you. One last thing we didn't talk about, I think is the most important thing, is how about those lines?
I know. I was wondering. We have a minute left. I mean, that's amazing. We are going to the Super Bowl. I want to say that November 21st, the Lions will be in the Super Bowl in New Orleans. So I'll make that known. February 9th. I think it's February 9th. We will be there.
It's happening.
I won't be there in person. I'll probably be at home, but I will stake the claim that we will be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. We're going. We're going to the Super Bowl, folks. Detroit Lions, Super Bowl champions. All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, I got it in time.
There's your low-key
faces.
My favorite is in the background, like the snowflake and the deer and the.
I made it a little faster.
I like it. It's saying that on the Detroit skyline. That's amazing.
All right. So take that thing off the screen. All right. So thank you for joining us. Where can people keep up with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I would say I post, a couple times a week on LinkedIn. So that's where you can find me. So look for me there. Also, I have a newsletter called Boy Meets Data. So I've been trying to do that a couple times a month, post my stuff there as well on Substack. So between LinkedIn and Substack is where you can find me.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you again. And thanks for joining us this week, Aaron.
All right. Yeah. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
All right, folks. So thank you for sticking with us. We are out of time here on the Super Data Brother. Appreciate what awesome audience we had this week. Very lively, great questions. These are the best shows, right? When you are active, it's the best show by far. You can catch us every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Not next Thursday, because next Thursday is Thanksgiving here in the United States, and I will be at a Lions game. So we won't be next Thursday, but Thursday, December 5th, we will be back. And I think we have Darren Wood lined up to come on the show to discuss data products. So he is a data product expert. He gave a presentation at Big Data London all about data products. It's a very hot topic, as always. I'm looking forward to having him on the show. So tune in Thursday, December 5th to catch Darren Wood as we go deep on data products and how to bring product thinking into your data practice. So you can always catch our archive, youtube.com/c/Super Data Brothers. Go there, like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and all that stuff. Anything else to tell the people about, Eric, before we go?
Nope, I think you covered it.
All right. Well, then until next time, everybody, I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are the Super Data Brothers. Take care, everybody. Ciao.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Well, it might not be that bad.
No.
Actually, it might be kind of nice.
Yeah.